What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back to another reaction video. Hey, today we checking out something new, or someone new, should I say. His name is M Enterprises. I seen him on my Explore page, and one of his videos intrigued me, you know what I'm saying? It says, Smallville is not a good show. Now, you guys don't know much about me, but I'll tell you something about me. My favorite show is Smallville. Out of all the shows that I've watched and binged and, 12 season shows and this and that, Smallville still stands supreme. I've probably watched it 3 times. I'll say 2.5 because I got sidetracked. But yeah, we're gonna get straight in this. I'm not gonna go on no little rambling tangent. You know what I'm saying? He probably clickbaited me or something, who knows? But hey, we're gonna get straight into this. Let's go.
Alright, I have a confession to make. This low-key might put me on fraud watch.
I mean, starting out with a clip of So Illuminati. If y'all don't know who that is,
a multitude of
educate.
DC TV shows, whether it would be the Arrowverse shows on the CW like Arrow, The Flash, Legends of Tomorrow. I pretty much stopped watching those shows altogether after Crisis on Infinite Earths, as I regularly kept up with those shows here and there up until that point. I've also grown fond of some of the non-CW live-action shows like
I haven't really watched any of the CW shows except for Arrow and The Flash.
You may or
but
may not have
I only watched like the first 4 seasons of The Flash.
Or a set of characters across media and specific adaptations they've had over the years. I never really talk about Smallville and how that show depicts some of the characters from DC Comics lore. There's a reason for that. Before these past few months, not once have I seen a single episode of Smallville.
You are a worthless, bitch-ass nigga. Your life literally...
I know, but hear me out.
I'm not thinking that, bro.
Smallville had already ended, and the way I'd usually catch up with seasons, say I missed a season of The Flash or something, I would watch it on Netflix. That's how I got into shows like Supergirl and so on when they were airing. But to my knowledge, Smallville was never on Netflix, so the opportunity to watch the show never presented itself to me at that time. It was always on Hulu. The idea of watching Smallville never really came up for the longest time. It's not that I didn't want to watch it, it just was never on my radar. Then a few months back, I randomly thought to myself, wait a minute, I've actually never seen Smallville. That's kind of weird. So I got myself a little Hulu subscription and binged all of the seasons of Smallville. And after taking the time to actually watch the series in full, I can say with confidence that Smallville just isn't a good DC show. It's a goddamn fantastic DC show. Well, you really thought I would sit here for however many minutes and talk trash about
me, man. He did.
I probably don't need to do this, but I thought I'd give a heads up anyway on spoilers, because I'm going to be spoiling like the entire show. Smallville's pilot aired before I was even born, so if for whatever reason you haven't seen it, I mean, the show is mad long. 10 seasons of television amounting to 217 episodes in total, each 40 plus minutes in length. Smallville has got to be the longest running DC TV show ever, airing from 2001 to 2011. But the journey was definitely worth it. Brother, I was locked in while watching the series. That intro music is majestic. I didn't skip it once while watching the series. I think that's the shonen anime watcher in me. Listen to that joint 217 times. Nothing
for real, bro.
Make me forget it.
Hey.
Only way to get it out of my head is to make me go through some electroshock therapy the way Lionel did Lex in that one episode. I think what works best in Smallville is the focus on its core cast of characters, where you're invested in the arcs that are part of due to how they're written and not just because of the IP the show's connected to. How in the world did you make me like Lex Luthor of all people for a brief period?
Because it's
obviously his downfall was inevitable.
It's like him and Clark was best friends,
or do the best
like brothers, and like
scrutinized for the actions of his
he was always there for Clark.
It makes Lex's descent into evil all the more tragic because him and Clark had such a strong bond and dynamic where they were almost like brothers.
Yes, exactly.
Did you ever miss not having a sibling? I used to, until I met you, Clark. You're closer to me than any blood brother.
You see that mistrust build up over time, with Clark constantly having to keep his abilities a secret to those around him, including Lex, coinciding with Lex's desire for power and partaking in shadier practices as time goes on. Their entire dynamic was pretty much like,
and you just let that shit happen? You supposed to be my brother. You think I ain't your brother? Man, fuck you. I'm out.
For the longest time, I would hear people praise Michael Rosenbaum's performance as Lex Luthor, saying he's the best live
Nah, for
action
real.
interpretation. I never doubted those people or thought they were just glazing him or anything, but since I
I
hadn't
remember
seen
how
the show yet, I
Rosenbaum
had no strong thoughts
used
on
to
that take.
talk
I
about
completely
how he didn't
understand
like
gassing him up after watching
saying giant summaries or essays, and then Clark would have to
His turn
respond with
wasn't one
one
of those
word.
things that just
So,
happens for no reason or is
I mean, he's a
rushed.
good
You see
actor,
how
bro.
being
It just showed his
raised by Leonard
intelligence.
Luthor
Like,
affected him, along with constantly being blamed for his father's actions, toppled by Clark
first with
constantly
Lex
keeping
Luthor.
secrets. I think it was the Lexmas episode that solidified Lex's quest for power, and he deemed it a necessity in order to survive, as he
I
went through
remember
a
this
dream
episode.
sequence where him and Lana Lang were happy together. Lana was pregnant, but she had complications during childbirth. Lex asks his father for help, but his father refuses, resulting in Lana's death in this dream world. My dislike for Lex as a character really manifested in season 6, which is a good thing, as I disliked him more in a sense of, oh, I can't believe you did this, rather than disliking how he was written, meaning the writers did their job well. That's when they started pushing the whole Lex and Lana relationship, which I wasn't the biggest fan of.
Bro,
It came to
nobody
a point where I'm
was.
sitting there
I
on
feel
my
like Lana
computer
was
screen
just a
praying
bot,
on
bro.
Lex's downfall, talking about some Smallville writers. I want you to kill Lex Luthor. Little didn't I know my wish would eventually be granted. Speaking of Lana Lang, I don't know what the general consensus is on Lana, but I feel as if she's one of those characters that overstayed their welcome throughout the course of the series. Now, don't get me wrong, you will never see me complain about
Nah,
seeing
for
more
real,
Kristen
because
Kreuk on
I
screen.
feel like I
Because,
started getting tired of
Lord
seeing her.
Jesus.
Like, they
Clark
started
Kent,
giving
I think
her
I understand where you're
magic
coming from.
abilities
You know, a lot of
or
actors
something
will
like
say,
that. Like, she was
"It's
a
just
witch or
work.
something.
It's there's nothing there.
But I guess
Bullshit.
people like her or something.
If Kristen
Maybe.
Kreuk, one of the most beautiful women in the world, is playing this character and coming on to you, it doesn't get old. I don't care who you are, folks.
This man Rosenbaum
If she
crazy.
showed up at the Luthor mansion, Lex would be like, let's do one more, guys. One more take, please. One more take.
But you as your character had to confront that. Like, she was doing that in front of you a little bit.
She did a
doing
little bit.
the whole witch crazy
yes,
thing.
yes, and I remember specifically when she was whispering in my ear, I was just like, oh, oh, Lord, stop that.
Hey,
I really had to be in character. I really had to straighten it out.
I genuinely thought we wouldn't see more of her character once Clark graduated from high school. It got to a point where they would do this constant back and forth, will they, won't they, since Clark refuses to reveal his secret to Lana. Oh, she's in a relationship with Whitney, but then he died in combat. Clark and Lana start dating, then they break up. Then they get back together, then they break up. Now she's dating Jensen Ackles. They break
Then
up,
she
and
gets
Lana
married
gets
to
back
Lex.
with Clark. They break up
Like-
again, and now she marries Lex Luthor for some reason. Then she gets
Like,
back
what
with
is
Clark.
this,
Then
bro?
she leaves the show, comes back
What is
for a
this
little bit,
boppery?
then leaves again. It's like, what are we doing here? It painted a clear picture they had
Stop,
no
bro.
idea what to do with her in season
Clown
8
shoes.
when she temporarily gets powers. I remember just sitting there thinking,
Offering? On God? Just like that.
like, we know she's not the end-all, be-all for Clark. Lois Lane is right there.
There
At
we
some
go.
point, I'm like, Clark, why are you so infatuated with this woman? It's not going to work out, gang. The relationship between Lex and Lana was just outright despicable, because the entire purpose of this pairing seemed to hurt Clark after he dumped Lana, as Clark thought being together would put her in danger. Lex had been infatuated with Lana even while she was with Clark. Then, when him and Lana get married, Lana finds out Lex had been secretly injecting her with hormones to make her believe she was pregnant just so that she could stay with him. Diabolical behavior if I've ever seen. Lana's about
I
to leave
remember
him,
that,
but
man.
Lex
That's-
says he can't
that was
just let her walk away. As evil
That
as
was
Lex can
devious
be,
work.
there's no way he would hit the woman he claims to love so much and marry.
Cap.
Out of all the notable DC
Lex like
heroes
that,
show up
man.
sporadically
He a
throughout
villain
the
for
course
a
of the
reason.
series, whether it be
Boy,
Aquaman,
crash out,
Triple,
D1 crash
Zatanna,
out, man.
Martian Manhunter, with some only appearing in a few episodes here and there,
Yeah.
Green Arrow has got to be my favorite out of the bunch. Once he became a series regular, Oliver
I feel like the
Queen honestly
crazy
became one of
thing
my
is
favorite
in
characters the whole
Smallville,
show. Hot
even
take, I
before
think
he
Smallville has a
became
much more faithful
Superman,
adaptation of Oliver
Superman,
Queen than the Arrowverse.
he was
Justin
already
Hartley's
introduced
performance is a lot
to
more in line with what you'd
most of the
expect
people
a
from
young
the
Oliver
Justice
and
League.
how he interacts with Clark
And
Kent
then
and
he
the rest of
like
the cast.
went
I
against
think the
most of his
somewhat
villains,
grounded
bro.
nature
Like
of the show, or
like
as grounded as
Zod
you can
and
get
stuff
when
like
you
that.
implement
Like,
so many
you know what I'm
sci-fi
saying?
elements, allows for the more fantastical side of
Doomsday,
DC
like
Comics lore
crazy
to
shit.
shine and stand out. This is obviously just a product of its time, but I find it hilarious that a lot of the
Bizarro.
heroes use jackets as the base of their suits. You got Dr. Fate with the mystical helmet of Naboo, summoning his suit via magic, and it's just funny seeing the costume with a zipper, but the design of the suit is surprisingly not that bad. Out of nowhere in the beginning of season 9, Clark just wears a black trench coat when roaming around as the Blur. Then Zod and the rest of the Kandorians do the same thing once they get powers of their own. Watchtower, which is basically just a clock tower, served as a base of operations for the costumed heroes, which was operated by Clark's longtime best friend, Chloe.
I didn't mind it though.
Sullivan is an interesting case because I was sort of okay with her in the first couple of seasons. The love triangle between her, Lana, and Clark wasn't really all that interesting when they were in high school. She could get a little annoying at times, but I think she was well handled by the time they all graduated from Smallville High. Chloe was essentially Clark's guy in the chair, or his oracle in a sense, after she found out about Clark's abilities. It eventually got to a point where she became super intelligent and a computer tech whiz in the later seasons, operating Watchtower for the other heroes out in the field. However, in season 8, it seems as if Chloe lost all of her brain cells despite how intelligent she's supposed to be. Season 8 focused on Davis Bloom, or Doomsday, as the main threat, as the writers took more of a Bruce Banner Hulk approach, with Doomsday being this inner monster Davis Bloom can't control. He was basically a science experiment manifested by Zod on Krypton. The combined DNA of Zod himself, his wife, and other Kryptonian warriors created Doomsday with the sole purpose of destruction and killing Clark when he was sent to Earth. Around the same time, Chloe and Jimmy Olsen rekindled their relationship and ended up getting married. However, Davis Bloom served as an EMT and developed feelings of his own for Chloe, and it got to a point where Davis could only control his Doomsday persona when he's around Chloe. So Chloe gets the bright idea to stay with Davis at all times without telling Clark or Oliver Queen like a moron. Oliver's like, yo, we need to kill this guy. But Clark refuses and thinks they should take an alternative route. So Clark gets the bright idea to send Davis Bloom / Doomsday to the Phantom Zone so that he can't cause any more harm. I'd say that's the best of both worlds, right? He doesn't have to kill Davis while simultaneously making sure he can't harm anyone else. As he's ready to send him to the Phantom Zone, Chloe goes to the fortress to stop Clark. You may be asking, why would Chloe do this? I'm glad you asked, because I cannot give you a concrete answer other than the fact that she was just being really idiotic throughout the course of the season. She states that Clark wouldn't be able to live with himself and is indeed saving him, even though Clark has no intention of killing Davis and wants to send him to the Phantom Zone.
Superman has sent people to the Phantom Zone before.
Serial killer who can't control his actions as Doomsday. And to be honest, killing him wouldn't even be all that inhumane, because not only is he not human, he's a fabricated science experiment from Krypton who thought he was human up until much later in the season. You don't want Clark to kill Doomsday, but then you go out of your way to prevent him from sending Doomsday into the Phantom Zone?
That is totally retarded.
To make matters even worse, Chloe's own husband, Jimmy Olsen, caught onto Davis's antics before anyone else. But she didn't believe Jimmy and thought he was going crazy after he was attacked by Doomsday at their own wedding. Then near the end, when Clark uses Black Kryptonite to separate Doomsday and Davis Bloom, Davis kills Jimmy, and Chloe has the audacity to say that Jimmy's death is both her fault and Clark's.
He didn't deserve to die, Clark. He died because you and I screwed up. Because we made a mistake.
We? Now we going to war. What do you mean we? Nintendo? No, nigga, we as in us. Us. Are you talking about nigga, us?
Chloe, Jimmy's death is completely your fault. Oliver wanted to kill
could have been in the Phantom Zone.
Clark thought it was too much and said it would be better to send him to the Phantom Zone. You prevented Clark from sending him to the zone, resulting in the deaths of countless innocent lives, Oliver and Jimmy getting kidnapped, Oliver nearly getting killed by Davis, followed by Jimmy actually dying in your arms because you didn't allow Davis to be dealt with earlier. She really thought it would be better to stay with him at all times so he could never turn into Doomsday. Oh, don't worry, he cares for me and won't turn when I'm around him. Okay, what happens if something happens to you then? You have to be around him 24/7 just so he won't turn. How could you possibly think that's a good idea? One of my initial concerns was the use of the Freak of the Week format, where each episode would introduce a new superpowered individual, often related to the meteor shower, to challenge Clark. I could see how it laid the foundations for future DCCW shows like The Flash, where the show had weekly metahuman villains thanks to the particle accelerator. Thankfully, the writers were smart enough to not abuse the formula, as later on they would focus more on interconnected story arcs, and it would eventually get to a point where if they do have an antagonist with abilities, they're either metahuman or got their powers from somewhere else unrelated to kryptonite. I think it's definitely not as prominent after Clark graduates high school, but some of these encounters with the meteor infected would bring about important lessons Clark would learn that would establish the man he would become in the future. Smallville holds the crown for the best depiction of Jonathan and Martha Kent, right? Very rarely do you have stories nowadays where both parents are important figures in a character's life, where they're both good people and the dad isn't like a deadbeat or a bumbling idiot, you understand that Clark isn't some righteous hero just because of his abilities, but it's also due to him being raised by the Kents. He wouldn't be the man we know he will become without their guidance. Honestly, can't imagine someone holding the belief that
Damn, I
Clark
remember
Kent
that
or Superman is
episode
a
when he
boring
first started
character after
flying,
watching
bro.
Smallville. A
I was
character's
like, this is
death
goated.
would be bound to hit harder on a TV show over a movie since you spend more time with said character over the course of several seasons. Smallville is one of the only instances in media where Jonathan Kent's death actually hits hard like a ton of bricks.
Bro,
That scene did not feel good at
you.
all. As for Miss Lois Lane herself, does Smallville have the best on-screen Lois Lane and Clois dynamic?
Hey, if you ask me,
I mean, it's a
indeed
top contender
does.
for sure. It's crazy how both Superman shows
Like, they was hitting it off from the
debut,
jump, bro.
being Smallville
Going,
and
they had like
Lois
witty
both
back and
nailed
forth,
the Clark and Lois
you know,
relationship. The positives of being a TV series
clowning
is that
each
you
other.
get to see connections develop. To me, it never felt forced or rushed. It made it even more frustrating when Lana Lang came back for a little bit in season 8 during Chloe and Jimmy's wedding. It's like, yeah, the Clark and Lois agenda is finally moving. Things are going along quite well.
No way. I can't believe it.
Like, get your clown ass out of here. See, this is like one of those moments where she came back, bro. It's
kind
like,
of find odd is
why?
how Lois and Clark are set to get married in the penultimate episode of the series, but their wedding gets interrupted thanks to Apocalypse heading towards Earth and Oliver temporarily being corrupted by Darkseid. They don't decide to get married for another 7 years after the time jump during the very last scene of the show. I guess it was to match up with the timeline scene in the source material to some degree. The quality of the show may have dropped just a little bit after season 7 because that's when Michael Rosenbaum left the show and his presence was kind of missed. I think the only season I really wasn't a fan of entirely was season 9, which centered on General Zod and the Kandorians. That's by far the weakest major plotline to me anyway. Although I really like what they did with Checkmate and how they introduced some members of the JSA. I didn't mind this series finale, but I feel like there were elements that were very underwhelming. Darkseid's defeat was incredibly anticlimactic and abrupt. Clark learns to fly after like a decade, rushes through him, and then he's just gone. Then Clark just pushes Apocalypse out of the way, I guess, as it heads towards Earth. I hated how they killed off Tess Mercer, as she was really starting to grow on me. I know it's for the sake of maintaining the status quo so that Lex Luthor and Superman can become proper enemies in the future, but I feel like it was kind of a cop-out that Tess just put some black ink on Lex's face so that he would forget about Clark Kent. Because before Lex's death, he found out about Clark being Kryptonian and being named Kal-El and whatnot. Then Oliver Queen blew him up in a truck, but Lex had a bunch of his clones in the making at Cadmus Labs with all of his memories. It also begs the question as to why Tess didn't just use the ink on Lionel Luthor from the parallel Earth in the beginning, since he was the one who wanted to bring back Lex from the dead. They literally erased 7 seasons worth of Lex Luthor's character arc. I also thought they would have banded all the heroes together that were established throughout the course of the show to defeat Darkseid, since the show puts so much emphasis on how Darkseid would be the greatest threat Clark's ever faced. Although the John Williams theme playing in the final scene as Clark's ready to take off I thought was pretty cool. I had mentioned in a previous video that the cameo in the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover,
I feel like that's the best ending
didn't make much sense
for the show.
To me for Clark Kent's character.
Satisfied, I was satisfied.
Smallville continuity and all the trials and tribulations Clark went through to become Superman. You see an older Clark Kent who's settled down with Lois Lane at the Kent farm as he's confronted by the Arrowverse Lex Luthor, and you find out that Clark gave up his powers to live a normal life.
It's kryptonite, which has no effect on me ever since I gave up my powers. That is worth more than any superpower.
Now, at the time, I hadn't finished Smallville yet, and I would see people in the comments of the clip of Clark's cameo say, "Oh wow, this makes so much sense for Clark's character." Or even in that multiverse video I made where I talk about the scene, I saw this one comment saying how the cameo was really great because there are other heroes to defend Smallville in his absence.
Nigga, no.
After watching every single episode of Smallville, it honestly just makes the cameo scene even worse. All that effort in emphasizing Clark Kent's destiny and becoming the greatest hero.
Why would they do that
Additionally, it contradicts with the show's timeline, because characters from the future like Booster Gold or the Legion of Superheroes would rave about Clark's efforts as a hero and what he represents. There's also the vision of his future accomplishments seen by Dr. Fate. I mean, how Lois in the final season almost decided not to marry Clark because she thought him being around her would prevent Clark from saving Kepler's countless
shit,
lives, and Lois thinking she would just serve as a distraction from completing his destiny. Don't get me wrong, there have been moments in the show where
W
Clark
cameo,
wishes
but
he could be normal and
no.
not have any innate abilities, but he generally gets rid of that mindset once he's out of high school, and by the time he reaches adulthood, he fully understands the importance in becoming the hero he's destined to be. The show ain't perfect, it has its ups and downs, CGI doesn't hold up by today's standards, but all in all, it's a banger show. I enjoyed my time seeing Clark Kent grow as a character, taking into account the experiences learned from his parents as well as his vigilante allies later down the road. Without a doubt, one of the best portrayals of Clark Kent in live action. It captures the human element of the Superman mythos, which is something you can't fumble when adapting the character, because if you do, well then we're gonna have some problems. Also, put the show on Netflix. I would have watched Smallville years ago if it was on that app. One of the other streaming services like Max or something needs to have a bunch of Superman shows and movies on there as sort of a binge collection to build hype for the Superman movie next year. I'd like to imagine there's still a strong fan base for the show after all these years. Recently, I've been enjoying the Talkville podcast with Michael Rosenbaum and Tom Welling, where they rewatch all episodes weekly and do discussions on each episode, occasionally bringing on guests who starred in the series. Kind of poetic how the first live-action CW DC show was Smallville, and the last one that will air will be the 4th and final season of Superman and Lois. An era of DC TV really started and will end with Superman. But before I hop out with the video, just remember,
Always hold on to Smallville.
Dope. Well, there we have it, man, for the Smallville is not a good show reaction. M Enterprises, you did give me with some little clickbait, but hey, your take was nice, man. You broke it down very nicely. I'm glad you enjoyed the show, man. It's one of my favorite shows, like I said in the beginning. Shoot, you hit them key points for real, man. I love that show. I'm glad you made this video. All of his stuff is gonna be down in the link of the description. If you wanna go to his channel, show some love. I'm probably gonna react to some more of his videos because it seems like he does Marvel and DC content, and that's really awesome. So if you enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Boosh.
Fight back,